Hello everyone, how are you going? And welcome to Why Didn't Jamaica Join Canada? Something that sounds really weird because you'd think that, if anything, they'd be joining the USA, not Canada.
Jamaica is not a part of Canada. Seems obvious, but there have been a couple of points in history where a union between the two has been proposed.
Right, okay.
The same is also true for the rest of Britain's former colonies in the Caribbean, where the same idea was put forward in the 1960s. So why didn't it happen? Why isn't Jamaica or any of these countries a part of Canada? So, in the 19th century, there were some small-scale discussions on who should be able to join the brand new Canadian Confederation.
Right.
Britain was fairly neutral on whether or not its Caribbean territories would be run from London or Ottawa.
Well, alrighty then. Even though we don't have the whole picture, it has certainly started to be painted because I can understand how, well, like you just said, Britain didn't care whether they were being run from across the pond or not, but then it becomes interesting because I guess Britain acknowledged the fact that Canada was well established enough to be able to run these countries from a closer proximity. And so you can see that if all these islands were once British colonies, you know, the Bahamas are up there, Jamaica's down there, and everything else in between. If they were once British colonies, then almost through inheritance would they just become part of Canada as well.
This was because a colony of a colony is still really a colony, and also Britain's attention was much more focused on India because money. This discussion was mostly academic though until after the First World War. At this point, Britain was struggling with being broke. As such, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George wanted to consolidate the governments of some colonies to make things cheaper.
They really did just have so many colonies all over the world. Like, as soon as you just start bringing Africa into it, and then you go, oh, okay, they had the Bahamas in there, they had half North America, and then even India is being chucked in there, and so you can really start to see why so many people didn't like the British Empire, or don't like the British in general, because they really did just come in and just kind of take over half the world. And I never thought about the fact that you could even have things like this.
Because a colony of a colony is still really a colony.
As I guess generally I would just think that, okay, you have to have everything going back to a singular point, otherwise you're going to have all these kind of mutinies almost just forming all over the world, and I guess you kind of did. It was just the fact that they were powerful enough and widespread enough that no one really wanted to rise up against them because they just get wiped out.
As such, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George wanted to consolidate the governments of some colonies to make things cheaper. And one such proposal was that Canada, which was much less bankrupt, would run the Empire's Caribbean colonies. But Canada's Prime Minister, Robert Borden, declined. Not because he didn't want the islands. He definitely did, mostly as compensation for all of the world warring that Canada had been doing. He reluctantly declined though because the Canadian people opposed it. Many of whom, including the opposition, saw empire as the reason why Canada had been dragged into the conflict in the first place.
Classic international turmoil. There really isn't too many things that have stopped progress more than that, is there? I mean, I'm not sure you can call colonizing a colony as progress, even if it is an inherited one, but by the same means, it certainly would have been a very difficult decision to make, to go, oh, we really want these islands, but everyone is going to be very unhappy if we do take them, especially because we have our own thing going on, and that has been proven to be working a little bit better than the UK's and England's, and so I'm not sure how much we want to be involved with you guys, to be honest.
And as such, Jamaica remained under the control of London. During World War II, Britain's relationship with its Caribbean colonies became strained, and as a result, Canada filled the void and relations between the two improved. The British government could see that its empire was unravelling, and so it opted to begin the process of preparing the Caribbean for independence. It did this with the least effort possible in what's known as boilerplate independence. This is where Britain used a one-size-fits-all approach to decolonisation.
Hang on a second, before I dive too much into this, I feel as though I'm about to have a massive knowledge bomb just dropped on me. I honestly have never even thought about the fact that you can decolonize a place. I mean, I guess you'll always have some kind of cultural ties to the place, whether it be architecture, personnel, or food, or whatever it may be, but the fact that you can just kind of all of a sudden wrap it up and go, alright, you're independent now, you're not getting any help from us anymore, that can really be deadly, I can only assume, especially for these tiny little islands. And so now I'm wondering if this letter is somewhat along the lines of what they actually said, but let's read it. Congratulations, X, on your independence from us. Please don't commemorate the day because it may make us feel bad. Okay, something tells me that that isn't exactly the letter that they said, or maybe it is, maybe they really were just thinking quite forward. I mean, I guess thinking about it, I've obviously heard of the USA's Independence Day before, but I've never tied that to decolonization, because as far as I'm aware, it came from an internal want and an internal need to be able to get away from the UK, not that the UK went, okay, we don't want you anymore. And so maybe that is where the difference is. One is just gaining independence because you fought for it or you asked for it or whatever it may be, and the other is just getting decolonised because you were forced into it.
This is where Britain used a one-size-fits-all approach to decolonisation. Britain didn't want to repeat this process 10 times, and so it just merged all of its Caribbean colonies together to form the West Indies Federation. During this process, it was discussed whether or not they would become independent or simply join Canada as a single province. Some of the islands were pro-Canada, and others, notably Jamaica, were pro-independence. The leaders of the Federation couldn't agree on basically anything, and so it fractured in 1962, and one by one each part became independent. And so after their freedom, surely there was no desire for any of these countries to join Canada, right? Well, there were two. The first was British Honduras, whose interest was much more about Britain doing a terrible job at preparing it for independence than any real desire to join another nation. Honduras and its neighbour Guatemala had many disagreements on borders, access to the sea, and trade. And Britain didn't care enough to fix any of these problems.
Of course not. Like I was saying, they absolutely would have been left high and dry, and it makes sense from a British point of view because you're getting rid of them because you're going broke, and so you're not going to be putting any infrastructure or money into the countries and building them up before you get rid of them because you're getting rid of them. But by the same means, you are absolutely about to destroy these colonies because you came in, took everything they had, and then just left them high and dry with nothing. Yeah, you joined them all together in an attempt to boost them all up, but that's like joining all of Africa together and go, alright, on your way. Like, there are different countries and colonies here. There is no way that everyone is going to be able to just make a decision on that, and so of course they're going to fall apart.
Which is why some politicians in Honduras pushed to join Canada. This never went anywhere, and British Honduras gained full independence as Belize in 1981. The second was the Turks and Caicos Islands here. The people who lived there wanted much better access to other markets and countries for themselves and for their goods. But Britain was in a no foreigners please kind of mood, and so politicians there discussed the idea of joining Canada. This proposal gained steam until the 1980s when some prominent Canadian politicians backed the idea and official talks between the two took place.
Wow, that surprises me about how recently this entire thing was still being dealt with in the 1980s, you know, they were originally talking about world wars and things like that, but 1988 for goodness sake. But then hearing everything that he is talking about, it makes sense as to why it would have taken so long, because they were left high and dry for so long just fighting just to get anything through their doors. Like they said, Britain went, okay, we'll leave you, but we don't want any of you either.
Most of the islanders backed joining Canada, but the Canadian people were very focused on another divisive issue at home, a free trade agreement with the United States. This debate raged for years and was so important to Canadians that nobody had any desire to discuss grabbing a few Caribbean islands and what that would entail. And given that this debate took about a decade to settle down, the idea of annexing a Caribbean island just sort of faded, leaving Canada without a Hawaii of its own.
Can you imagine the amount of trade and tourism that would bring to that country? Honestly, as soon as winter rolled around, I reckon you would have about half the Canadian population just flying south immediately. And even though I'm not sure exactly where they would all fit, because that is an absolutely tiny island, at the same time, at least Canada is known for being a nice, peaceful, and just friendly bunch of people, and so there shouldn't be too many problems there. But the thing that doesn't make any sense to me is to how they were too busy to grab these islands. You know, the islands agreed, they wanted to come on board, but Canada like, oh no, we can't be bothered just to stamp and sign this one document, basically, is what it would have taken. We're just too busy trying to organize this massive international agreement with the USA, and we got to get that right, but we just have no time for anyone else. Like, really? No time at all for anyone else? That really doesn't seem as though you're playing your cards right. Surely you would capitalize on the fact that you have just been given a winning hand. You know you're eventually going to sort out a deal with the USA, so that can just be put on the back burners by a day just to sort this out. But hey, I guess you could probably say the same thing about so many countries all over the world that have taken opportunities that they probably shouldn't have and didn't take the opportunities that they probably should have, but unfortunately for everyone, no one has the power of hindsight that they can apply into the future, or if you do, please let me know because I'd love to pick your brain. But I guess all that means is when making a decision, big or small, you know, what coffee to buy in the morning or what colony to bring into part of your country, you really just have to do your research because otherwise you could seriously be losing out. But anyway, in saying that, I reckon I'm going to call it this, so thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to do the YouTuber algorithmic things down below. Also, if this is the first video of mine that you are watching, then make sure to go check out any other ones I've done. Also, make sure to go check out the original video down in the description below, or hey, maybe even just want to consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on one of these in the future. But all in all, have a good one and see ya.